Despite what the leftist tells you, President Trump has been following all of these orders that I think are part judicial coup, part judicial insurrection, part judicial sedition. The biggest issue in terms of public controversy has been rulings, or the court case before Chief Judge Boasberg, who is the chief judge here in the District of Columbia at the district court level. And what happened was that President Trump, about a week ago, issued a proclamation under the Alien Enemies Act. And what is the Alien Enemies Act? It's a powerful tool given to the President of the United States to protect America from invasion. And it essentially says that aliens can be designated, if they're so designated, if the proclamation so designates them, they can be removed immediately by the President. There's no question about it. And here's the specific language from the Alien Enemies Act, which was passed in July of 1798, and it looks like it was signed into law by the President of the United States at the time, John Adams, and it's been used rarely since, usually only in times of declared war. But as you'll see, there's good reason to use it now in light of Joe Biden's invasion. Section 1. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, and they were assembling up in Philadelphia. You know, we didn't even have the Capitol yet. That whenever there shall be a declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government, or any invasion or predatory incursion shall be perpetrated, attempted or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government, and the President of the United States shall make public proclamation of the event, all natives, citizens, denizens, or subjects to the hostile nation or government, being males of the age of 14 years and upwards, who shall be within the United States and not actually naturalized, so not citizens, shall be liable to be apprehended, restrained, and secured and removed as alien enemies. So look at that second part again. Obviously, we don't have a foreign war, right? We don't have a war with any declared nation. The President's proclamation relates to the second part, any invasion or predatory incursion. And he alleges, and so states in an official proclamation under this law that's 200 plus years old, that Venezuela's government has engaged in such behavior as it relates to these gang members here in the United States. And so what happened is the ACLU immediately rushed the court, was before the chief judge, Judge Boasberg, and alleged that 5 of their clients, they had 5 clients, you know, were Venezuelan nationals, but they really weren't part of this gang and shouldn't be deported. And Judge Boasberg allegedly issued a court order orally saying, oh, you know, bring them back if the plane's left, or they shouldn't be removed, or whatever the vague language was, and then issued a written order. And what the Trump people did was, there were 2 planes in the air. They didn't think they should have to be returned, not under the terms of either the oral order or arguably the written order. And the 5 who were at issue, they actually removed from one of the planes, and they were kept aside pursuant to the judge's order. Now, Judge Boasberg is angry because he thinks his order was thwarted in some way. Trump and many Americans are angry because they think Judge Boasberg was intervening in a way that was improper under the Constitution of the United States, Supreme Court precedent, etc. You saw the power, the awful power the president has under this law, and he made the proclamation. Now, Boasberg is yelling at the Justice Department about whether his order was flouted. And it doesn't look like it was. Was it followed closely and not in a way that gave it an overbroad nature? No. But this is an issue that's a legal fight back and forth, and how it turns out to me is not nearly as important as the underlying authority that Judge Boasberg seemingly is asserting, which I don't think has any constitutional basis. So the danger isn't, the fight over Trump versus the judge over following the order. The danger is the judge asserting unconstitutional authorities in a way that constrains the president, because he issued almost immediately a broad order, a class action ruling, essentially saying every person who was covered by this proclamation can't be removed. That's not what the law allows. The Trump administration tried to get the appellate court to move quickly on it. As far as I'm concerned, the court has been kind of stalling. And they go through in the brief this appellate ruling, or excuse me, this appellate brief, describing the proclamation. And they don't want to tell you, the big media doesn't, because they want to pretend that Trump is acting lawlessly. That his proclamation meets to the letter and spirit the requirements of the Alien Enemies Act that authorizes him to remove these alien threats from our nation. The president made findings that members of the transnational criminal organization, TDA, I don't know how is the name pronounced? Aragua? I've read it, but I've never heard it pronounced, believe it or not. In conjunction with a narco-terrorism enterprise backed by the illegitimate regime of Nicolas Maduro, the crazy dictator of Venezuela, are conducting irregular warfare and undertaking hostile actions against the United States. And that's in the preamble to the proclamation. TDA, the transnational gang connected to the government President Trump finds, has also engaged in and continues to engage in mass illegal migration to the United States for several purposes, including to inflict harm on U.S. citizens and support Maduro's regime in undermining democracy. Further, the gang is closely aligned with and has infiltrated Maduro's regime, growing under the governance of the leadership down there, who's Al-Assami is his name, the gang leader. And he's a fugitive as well. So these cartels, these gangsters that are being run by the Venezuelans, and I say that reminded me of the Cuban boat lift, where they specifically moved into the United States. Do you remember that? They emptied out their prisons and moved into the United States countless numbers of refugees and criminals in order to destabilize America. So the question is, did the president have the right to make the proclamation, and that should it be honored, and can it be second-guessed by the judiciary? And the answer is no, it can't be second-guessed by the judiciary. It really can't. The Supreme Court found the following. It's a famous decision, but back, I think it's I have it in my head, it was in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s. It was right after World War II. The courts have recognized, and this is from the brief, the legitimacy of the Alien Enemies Act as an exercise of war power reserved to Congress and the executive. The Supreme Court has observed that the Alien Enemies Act is, quote, as unlimited, unquote, a grant of power as the legislature could make it. The most expansive power granted to a president that was possible under Congress's purview. That's what the Supreme Court has found. And we have a district court judge here in Washington, D.C., second-guess the President of the United States, thinking that he had some right to order planes to turn around? Thinking that he could tell the president all over the nation no alien could be expelled under this proclamation issued under a law that's 200 years old, and no one, again, the court has already found, the court whose decision he's obligated to follow, by the way. He may object to the Supreme Court's analysis here, which is fine, but as a district court judge, he's supposed to follow it. The court has further explained that the statute encompasses, quote, matters of political judgment for which judges have neither technical competence nor official responsibility, unquote. No one elected Judge Boasberg, with all due respect, to be president or commander-in-chief or a congressman. I mean, that's the problem with when judges act as politicians in this case, or in these cases. I mean, I know Judge Boasberg. Nice man. Very, very personable. Of course, that's not the issue. His decisions are uniform, at least from my perspective, uniformly horrible on issues that Judicial Watch cares about, and specifically issues that Judicial Watch has been involved in. But he's a liberal jurist. And liberal jurists are tempted, and often do, substitute their political beliefs through their office, through their judicial powers, for the constitutional authorities, or substitute their belief and insert abuse their judicial authority to exercise legislative and executive branch powers, reserved to the people we vote for, not to unelected appointed judges. And this court has held, and this is, by this court, I think the brief is referring to the appellate court in the District of Columbia, which the judge is also bound to follow. The statute confers, quote, unreviewable power in the president to restrain and to provide for the removal of alien enemies. The courts have therefore limited their review and prior challenges to very narrow questions. There, the construction and validity of the statute, and whether the statute, when relevant, there is a declared war, and whether the person restrained is an enemy alien 14 years of age or older. And obviously they think the president's proclamation is pretty clear as to meeting the criteria that gives him the power to remove these aliens and designate them as removable under the Alien Enemies Act. And that's what this is all about. Even Trump's worst enemies don't deny he's been following all the court orders, however egregious and outrageous they have been. Does it completely stop his action? No. He pursues action where he can while taking into account court orders. And that's what he did with Judge Boasberg, and then what he's done repeatedly, despite all of the baseless orders, in my view, legally baseless, meritless, whatever the language you want to use. Despite what the leftist tells you, President Trump has been following all of these orders that I think are part judicial coup, part judicial insurrection, part judicial sedition. And some people want to exercise the impeachment prerogative to police this. And I addressed it, or Judicial Watch addressed it in part in an op-ed I talked about last time here in the Washington Examiner, and we had a report bringing everyone up to date as to the debate.
Yes, activist judges can be impeached, argues Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton in a recent op-ed he wrote for the Washington Examiner. Fitton writes, the framers of the Constitution address concerns about judges abusing their powers, by pointing to the constitutional check on any such abuse. That check, impeachment. In Federalist Paper number 81, Alexander Hamilton explained that while the judiciary may occasionally encroach upon legislative authority, its comparative weakness and total incapacity to support its usurpations by force limits the danger. Hamilton added that this is greatly fortified by the consideration of the important constitutional check, which is the power of instituting impeachments. He further added, impeachment alone is a complete security. The last time Congress used its impeachment powers on judicial activism was in 1804, when Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase was impeached by the House for, among other alleged misconduct, being an electioneering partisan. Chase was acquitted by the Senate. President Trump and House members have called for the impeachment of federal judges who have made controversial decisions that many argue unconstitutionally hijack the power of the presidency. In response, Chief Justice John Roberts issued an unusual statement. For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton said in response, "To the degree the Chief Justice's statement suggests that the practice at the federal level has been to allow judges and justices to go rogue with no impeachment check, he is correct. To the degree he suggests that this is what the Constitution and the law require, he is wrong." Go to judicialwatch.org to learn more.
So, as we note in that report, President Trump wants to impeach Judge Boasberg. And I think the articles of impeachment may have already been filed in the House. And he had a statement as to the correctness of his cause under the law here on Air Force One the other day.
Criticism that the Alien Enemies Act has only been invoked 3 other times. They were all during times of war. Do you feel that you're using it appropriately right now?
Well, this is a time of war because Biden allowed millions of people, many of them criminals, many of them at the highest level. They emptied jails out. Other nations emptied their jails into the United States. That's an invasion. And these are criminals, many, many criminals, murderers, drug dealers at the highest level, drug lords, people from mental institutions. That's an invasion. They invaded our country. So this isn't, in that sense, this is war.
He's right. He's right. Where's the outrage over Biden allowing this invasion? Isn't it interesting? Few judges made comments in that regard, even though that was the more dire threat to our constitutional republic. When I thought, by the way, what's interesting about that video I noticed is how hardworking Trump is. He came back and was talking to the press corps on Air Force One at 11:39 p.m. I think it was 11:39 p.m. It looked late. And he just never stops. And I think Chief Justice Roberts made a terrible mistake in issuing this statement. I think it was a political statement. It is rightly being seen as a critique of President Trump, a critique of members of Congress. And so I guess the chief has every right to make a statement like this. It's his prerogative. But I tell you, if he's going to engage in politics, there's going to be political pushback on it, right? If judges are going to be engaged in politics, the political branches will respond politically. And a political response under the Constitution, as we've highlighted here, is impeachment. Is Judge Boasberg going to be impeached by the House? I don't know. I don't know. Is one decision or enough to warrant impeachment? I don't know. Impeachment is what the majority of the House, an impeachable offense is what the majority of the House approves. I mean, you may think it's not enough for impeachment. I think when one looks at all of these judges who have issued some of these outrageous rulings, I think you'll see a history and pattern of judicial activism and, in my view, abuse of power under the law, where they substitute their own judgment improperly for elected representatives and other designated authority under the Constitution. And I tell you, in the least, as I note in this tweet, you know, Chief Justice Roberts' political statement, essentially, he comes down on the side of politics here. He says the court is making this stance, at least he is, on this political debate, because it is a political debate whether to impeach a federal judge. And what bothers me about his statement is I think it's designed to suggest that you can't impeach judges. And that it's, quote, as he said, it's inappropriate. Well, it's not been seen as inappropriate. There's been a debate about it. But it's not, quote, inappropriate. Maybe that's his opinion. That's his opinion. That's fine. But a Chief Justice, when he issues a statement like that, it suggests that there's law behind it and that he will impose the law as it relates to it. Not only that, it sends a signal to these lower court judges who are abusing their powers. Don't worry, I'll protect you from impeachment. And if I were in Congress and if I were running the judiciary committees in the least, Chuck Grassley runs the Senate Judiciary Committee. Our friend Jim Jordan runs the House Judiciary Committee. I think highly of both individuals. Chuck Grassley is one of my favorite senators. They should invite the Chief Justice to testify about impeachment and his views on impeachment. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.